Right. Give me a sec. Something that's irking me. So YouTube, you used to be able to basically for a live stream, right, post edit it and keep it as the live stream VOD. So cut out, for instance, the intro or any pauses, and that was a great time. But unfortunately, you can no longer do that. If you edit it in any way, it has to be saved as a new video. And publishing a 2-hour video, right, when the average watch time is around, say, 10 minutes for the channel, is not a great idea. So, bear with me as I ramble and do the normal sort of intro setup stuff, like changing the thumbnail, right? Since well, actually, OBS might allow it, but I don't know how to figure out how to preset the thumbnail, not just to be the default channel, since YouTube does allow, custom thumbnails. Well, I'm curious if they end up taking it away, similar to how they took away short thumbnails, right? Though not that they were ever really needed, unless I suppose you were perusing a channel and going through their shorts. People do that. Anyway, we'll crack some Monarch to start, because I've been sorting my Majestics, and apparently I'm missing Soul Shields. Not that I play Illusionist at all. And, well, Karen Husk, Valiant Dynamos, and Footsteps are all... I also swap to me talking now, right? Footsteps, Dynamos, and Karen Husk are all, some of the biggest legendaries. I think only beat out by New Horizon, Spring Tunic. Yeah, no, I feel like Monarch has some of the most expensive legendaries coming to mind. I have a, diagram somewhere. Anyway, let's start by cracking some Monarch before we jump into basically catching up on what has been, released by LSS in terms of articles, and then just going over, I guess, what we sort of talked about, right, in terms of channel bot videos that I've posted. We're trying to make this consistent, and what comes to mind for me consistently would be, a weekly recap on channel basis. Anyway, let's see what our Monarch has. It's my actual last field case of Monarch, unfortunately. So once it's gone, right? And everything's starting to get somewhat harder to come by, right? Every now and then you do see, relatively stuff for cheap. But nonetheless, let's crack some packs, see what we find to start off with, right? Decent M's, decent L's, well, aside from Doomsday and Eclipse, right? Other than that, the L's you can pull up, definitely a lot better. Alright, do I remember where stuff is? That is the question. Everything at the back? Beautiful. Cool. So we can cut to the back 4 cards, it looks like. So foils in the middle, that would probably be the Cold Foil, right? And token, and then your 2 rares. Don't need to pull anything out, although, well, I do really want to go through and sort all my cards into proper playsets, because I can probably make 2 to 3 playsets of most sets, of rares and commons, I mean. Obviously not Majestics. Right, rare. Here's the Serenity as the foil. I don't think there's any big chase foils. You basically hold on to stuff, right? Wait for Monarch 3 to come out, and then if it touches on the correct classes, we're golden. Herald of Judgment. Shadow Puppetry is not bad. Shadow, since I know the data now, right, is the cheapest Majestic typing, right? But Shadow Puppetry is the most expensive within said typing. I think it's like $250 though, so US. Not anything great. I think Herald of Judgment actually might beat it out. Although it is a good card, again, if Shadow gets a lot more playability, right? Shadow Puppetry is pretty extreme. Next 0 cost, next attack gets the +1, but the go again is the big thing, right? Alright. Hit 1 M. Expect at least 5 more. Harder for the foil. Harder for the rare. Don't want a common Cold Foil. Right? The Iron Knight set used to be interesting, but I think with the Guardwell from Hunted, it's now just the go-to for the rare / generic slot. Surely that must be out of gas in Commoner, right? The Guardwell set. Harder. Like a significantly better version of Frontline, right, from Dusk Till Dawn. Frontline could have been good if it was 3 block. We hold on to that. Oh, awesome. I think, actually, I can't remember if the library that I do have was burst or unlimited. So beautiful. Look at that. It is rainbow foil, meaning I can straight away swap it out. Hey, Stingray. Yeah, the Fable is beautiful. I can get rid of my rainbow foil one and hold on to my nice new shiny gold foil. So whether or not it becomes, decent or better, right? Again, hopefully we see Monarch 3. I feel like it should be the first set of next year, but, questionable. It might become okay. I don't want to say decent, but okay. We'll leave that out, I suppose. I don't really have room. It's always so cluttered around. Or just go on top. That's interesting. It's in a hard case, but it's also already curled. Alright. So, yeah. If we don't hit a legendary, I'm completely content. And a Celestial Cataclysm. That's still decent. Surely in Bolton, Cataclysm can play, right? It's just that Bolton doesn't see a huge amount of play. I mean, it's 0 for 7, and you can just fuel up from Luminars. Even, there's a lot of... Well, no, because you need all the soul resources for the Figments, right? So, it being played in Prism is probably less of a priority. But in Bolton, it should be gas. All things. Not too bad. 2 Majestics that we have hit. That's what we like to see. Exude Confidence is definitely a good foil one to find. And the Soul Shield. So, that's even better to me, right? Because I only had 2 copies of Soul Shield, so now I have a proper playset, right? But Exude Confidence, I think, is more expensive. So, this box, so far, has been actually very, very good, right? Cold foil library. Then 4 really decent Majestics, right? There's a lot of potential Shadow Puppetry if, again, Shadow gets a better hero, I suppose. Does it get played in Levia? Surely it's kind of good enough in Levia, right? This looks at the top card of your deck. You may banish it, so it fuels banishing. Gives you go again for one of your big brutes. That'd be nice. Yeah, double M's. Beautiful. Especially 2 of the best M's in the set. Can't ask for more. Although a cheeky legendary to go along with everything would be great as well. Genesis, not a bad one. We're already at 5. If we go above 6, then this is really a supremely great box. We'd expect 6 in our cold foil. Oops. Soul Reaping. God is very, very curious to me. Right? Obviously, I should explain my mentality whenever I pivot and start talking like that. China. I've had a lot of interest in China lately, right? And Soul Reaping just being this 1 for 6, regardless of what you have, seems really nice, right? Because usually you're at the 2 to 4 cost range, and that's kind of hard for big China. I wish it wasn't legendary, so you can take multiples. Cool. Hexagore does count as an M, even if it is a weapon. One more, and we're really happy. Nope. There we go. Sonata as well. So, yeah, 7 legendary. Above rate for the box, and our Cornfoil Fable. Beautiful. There's one more hiding in here for us. Not in there. 3 more chances. Not the foil. Rounds. There we go. We're above rate. we want Stubby Hammerers back? We want Stubby Hammerers back. So again, a card like this, if you just... no. You know what it is? If it wasn't 3, and it wasn't gain 1, right? Imagine if this converted, say, 1s to 2s, or I guess 2 to 3s, right? And that it? Was it? That'd kind of be a nice retool, right? So you couldn't get to the break point, but you could get everything to, say, 3 power. And you could take, like, Double Strike and the smaller cards that then, you know, become a lot more functional on that big bursty turn. Alright, look at that. Nice, sneaky Legendary. Why does that seem like that's the wrong coloring, right? For the Blasphemous? Shouldn't it be darker? Yeah, no, that's definitely oversaturated in the blues, right? Compared to Ursa. Might have to pull out other copies and see. Alright. Our foil is Deadwood Rambler. Okay. Fold and no M. Solo. Right? Very, very decent pulls out of the box. I think we definitely hit some of the top M's. Or Shield and a foil. Exude Confidence. Definitely. Yeah, and Shadow Puppetry. In the right setting. Explodes as well. And then, of course, our nice, beautiful cold foil library. Right. So, we'll crack another box at the end of the stream. I think one to sort of settle in, and then one to close out. Kind of nice, right? Feels wrong to see Blasphemo without the darker text box. I didn't actually pull it out and put it aside. It was in the last pack, right? We can find it. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, does kind of look weird. But I do want to compare with that later. I mean, we might find another one too. Well, I suppose it doesn't really matter where I stash these. From there for now. Alright. On to news. So, obviously not too much has really happened this week, but, you know, there's still some things worth discussing, I feel. What's one? There we are. Okay. So, we have, well, next week should be a lot more exciting, right? With the World Tour kicking off. Pro Tour? World Tour? Whichever, yeah, World Tour. No, Pro Tour. Yeah, it's right there in front of me. Right, in London. So, if you're interested in watching that, where's the time? It is, there we go. 7:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. God, what does that translate to? Yeah, no, I can't do math. Figure it out. Definitely worth, obviously, seeing, because there should be a lot juicy information about, what else is coming throughout the year. Probably stuff on the Mastery set for Guardian, which is definitely of high interest, since that's kind of our pseudo-supplementary set, right? And then, obviously, High Seas Love. So, yeah. Gonna be a big one, right? I think probably the biggest yet. Other than that, not too much for the Pro Tour. Convention promo. So, Puffin and Marilyn are in our Rainbow Foil, right? So, we highly expect that well, yeah, no, because it is Blitz compatible. Yeah, so I'd expect both the young and the old version, right, in the Gravy Bones Armory deck to come Rainbow Foil, right, which would be definitely nice. These are significantly better as con promos compared to, say, Blaze, which still feels highly weird because, you know, we had the whole Blaze will be accessible, Blaze will be found in these other means, and then not really much of Blaze. So, yeah. Wish that wasn't the case, but hopefully we don't continue the trend of, you know, exclusivity, right? I mean, we get Velda early, but Velda, again, we highly expect will be in the Mastery set for Guardian, right? Other than that, we have Roll of Honor, right? But we already knew last week, right? That Viserai already LL'd, right? Big blow, unfortunately, to Runeblade. Should hopefully see a retool, right? We need a lot of staple heroes again, right? Not the, obviously, joint like Aurora with Lightning Runeblade, right? Need a new Shadow Runeblade, need a normal Runeblade, yeah? That's a big one. The deck builder. So, in sort of parallel to Fabry, right? It's not LSS trying to take its place, although I'm kind of curious why they, you know, don't try to acquire Fabry or Teleshare, because they seem like just great assets that, you know, backed by LSS would do fantastic things. But we do have the gem deck builder, right? Which means we can import our decks from Fabry and basically just submit them all online digitally to our events, right? Rather than taking or writing out, you know, a sheet, which is definitely a nice, fantastic improvement, right? Again, the melding of Flesh and Blood's love of in-person in the Flesh and Blood and technological advances should happen a lot more often, right? I would also expect Mr. Bones to be Rambo for both. Yeah. Wonder if it'll be double-sided. I hope it's not double-sided, right? Although we are, you know, seeing more double-sided foils as well. So, could be. You know, with the new zero-gauge printing that we saw on, like, Slippy, it's doable. But I hope they're not double-sided, right? 2 cards. You know what? Where's the product release? Because usually does state. No, it's not. It's not actually available yet, right? Product sheet just goes to high seas. Yeah. Well, is it in the high seas? It is. Does it say at all? No, first duel. Pricing. Yeah, no. No mention of it yet, but yeah. Since only 2 of them are at Gen Con, it has to be somewhere, and that makes the most logical sense. It's just whether or not it's double-sided, right? So, yes, create and manage multiple deck lists, import decks from Fabry, so probably still, you know, just make them in Fabry, and then import them into your gem profile, right? And then just submit them directly to your tournaments so that you don't have to submit paperwork, right? I'm curious if this will become available for, say, limited and drafting, right? For, you know, the major events, because it would make kind of a little bit of sense to just do it digitally, right? And then you'd also, well, no, checking would be the big hassle there, actually thinking about it. So that would probably have to stay paper, right? So that, again, one other player could check your deck, make sure, you know, what you've listed is correct, / what you're taking is correct, right? But overall, again, it's a really nice change. It's currently in beta, right? Does not include deck list validation or card legality, hence why start Fabry, since Fabry does for the most part, right? And then it will be in effect for Battle Hardened in Dublin and Jakarta. And then, yeah, if we encounter any issues, submit so they can continue to refine and make a build-up. Yeah, kind of just seems like, you know, acquiring Fabry would be an idea. But, I don't know. LSS always seems like it's, God, what word to use? I don't want to say cutting corners, because it's definitely not cutting corners, but they are always stretched thin in what they're trying to do. So take the Armory decks, for instance, right? The rationale behind why they're limited printed is because LSS is continuously transitioning. We got 4 last year, and we're getting 5 this year. No, we got 5 last year with the Jarl, and we're getting at least 4, probably 5 this year as well, right? Which means that, you know, they set up the print, they print it, they transition to a new Armory deck, and they cycle that so that they don't have to, you know, keep 2 printers running, so to speak, right? Same for sets. That's why we see a lot shorter printing of sets, or one and done, right? Which, again, you know, contributes to our current growing pains, but, right, is more cost effective for LSS to continue expanding in the way they do. And, you know, the product line expansion is something that we do sorely need, especially with, you know, the cutting of supplemental sets, right? So overall, great changes to come and great changes to continue, right? Anything else article-wise? Nope, I think, yeah, again, quietish week, right? Again, expect a really big week to come. I think we touched on the Velda cards last time, right? All the new stuff, which, again, it's kind of weird that it's going to be exclusive. When was the Mastery? There we are, Mastery. When was this pushed to? Keynotes. You know what? That's the wrong thing to search then, right? Yeah, because there's too many Masteries. We do Keynotes. Yes. It was the World Championship, right? Where they had the timeline. Let's see. Yeah, here we are. Nope, that's the events. There we are. All right, so pushed to August, meaning that we do have it's not a horrible window, but if it was just the hero, that'd be something. It's the fact that we're getting what seems to be quite playable Guardian cards along with the Velda card, right? Bad of the Pulp and Promising Terrain both seem quite playable. We don't quite know what Draw or Crowd does when it resolves, right? The second line, but, you know, still both people drawing a card with, say, Earth or Bounty is going to be really nice as well. So, yeah, the fact that all of these are, promos for 1 to 2 months, maybe 3, is not as great as it could be. I'm glad the convention promos are not another exclusive like Blaze. She's not hard to get now, but she was really hard. Yeah, that was an unfortunate case. Retailer news, that's the other place we should probably check. But yeah, again, quite weak overall. But that's fine. We have some other stuff we can digest and talk about, right? Because I've been compiling various things, right? We go to Fabry. So basically, I've made deck lists of just Majestics, right? Bench slot, Ninja, Ranger, etc. So that I can gauge sort of the price points, which then brings us to some of our worth discussing finer points. So let me change some stuff around. Let's do it. We can go through some assets that I've made throughout the week, right? Starting with a beautiful table. Okay. So, not high seas, we'll go Maryland, right? This table is essentially the continued growth of Fab on a Majestic basis, right? Price point increase, set total increase, Majestic total increase, the division of Majestics into limited and expansion, the percentage of the set that they've been occupying and increasing, right? And then, more importantly, pull rates, and essentially how much product from a community basis has to be opened in order to supply playsets to the populace, right? So the big, scary number here is the fact that if we take a comparison to, say, Welcome to Rathe, and hopefully my mouse is somewhat visible, right? Being $326 worth of product, doubling to what we see now with the Hunted at $787, right? So just off of that merit alone, right? The fact that how much has to be opened has basically doubled. Devalues any increase to a print run that we might see, right? And, we're sort of gauging that high seas will probably be at 300,000, if that, right? You got to remember, it probably was, say, 250, 270, right? And then you throw in the change of localization for some of the European countries to English as well. That gets us to probably at least 300,000. But that 300,000 number isn't, quite 300. If we find the right one, I've gone the wrong way. Anyway, right? So again, if we take the lowest number from that table, which would be this 68%, which is not factoring in basically how hard expansion slot cards are to pull, right? And pricing. Then, a 300,000 display print run, right? Where we have to open 68% more product, means that it's equivalent to a 178,000 print run, right? Meaning that it's actually one of the smallest sets that we will see, right? It's akin to Outsides and Dust Till Dawn, right? And then we throw in new hero, new classes, kind of, right? Pirate, we don't know what exactly they're going to do with it, but overall that is kind of troubling signs that High Seas is just grossly undervalued. Again, not much LSS could do, right? This was, put into prints, designed, developed, and everything 2 years to a year ago, right? So they couldn't correct for all the recent big growth in the game. And basically, what LSS have, seemingly tried to maintain, looking at, again, this table, is as the community has grown, they don't want Majestics to be devalued. They've tried to maintain Majestics and their pricing. And that we've seen that somewhat work throughout sets, right? And then we get into sort of the growing pains territory, where we have those really big outliers of cards, right? Because, again, we're outpacing whatever printing LSS is doing in comparison to also, the changes to Majestic pull rates, and therefore devaluing the size of the print run. I saw the Max Armory deck video. So LSS leaked it, I think it was last week. Took it down, unfortunately, so you can't actually view it. I didn't actually see it, right? But, I'm part of a Discord that did, right? It's discussed, the cards were released. So I've taken the word for it, plus, there's been other videos on it as well. But yeah, you can't actually view it yourself. other than that, there was Heist in the Armory deck, other than the cards revealed. We'd also expect at least one more rare and probably 2 commons, right, that are specific to the Armory deck. It seems to be the trend with what they've been doing with Armory decks, right? We look at, say, the Aurora Armory deck for relevancy. So there's still possibly 3 other new cards in the Armory deck as well. But yeah, unfortunately, you won't be able to view it till most likely next week, right? But, you know, it's not too far away. I feel like they should have just leaned into it and released it early anyway. But yeah, it was pulled down because, well, it was up 2 weeks early. So yeah, nothing they can do about it. But yeah, so the scary thing about this is it means that all our recent sets kind of potentially have a majestic equivalence, right, in terms of the total population to Welcome to Rathe and Arcane Rising, right? Which is the worry, because they were also then, you know, reinforced with our history products. So overall, the scarcity of specific majestics is increasing, right? Which means that high seas, it's already troublesome to order. I don't know if anyone, you know, has had trouble pre-ordering, right? But pre-ordering, it's 2 months out and it's already going crazy. Sorry, 1 month out now? Either way, it was a month and a half out when you started pre-ordering, most likely, right? Whatever it is now, math aside, it's already getting dicey, right? I had one of my orders did fall through. I wanted 5 cases from them, and they've come back to me, unfortunately, and said, look, we'll give you 2 as a guarantee, but we don't know if we can fulfill the 5, because obviously they want to spread around, and that makes complete and utter sense. So the super rares for Welcome to Rathe, yes, are being included as majestics. So the pull rates, God, does my memory do me justice? I doubt that Nitro is in the Armory deck, unfortunately. Because, well, it still seems like a good payoff, but it does get devalued by Construct Bankbreaker, right? And all the other cards seem to want to keep your wrench, want to keep your equipment pieces, and just cycle hyperdrivers. So yeah, the super rares are being included as Welcome to Rathe and Arcane Rising. If you take a look at the pull rates, right, basically it evens out between the limited majestics and the super rares of these 2 sets to that 1 in 4 rate that we do see nowadays. So yeah, 25 majestics equivalent for Welcome to Rathe and Arcane Rising when we're comparing it to, say, the 42 or 46 in High Seas. The other big thing is the jump from Hunted to High Seas is actually a lot greater, because it's not just 4 majestics. The heroes are no longer included, so it's now an extra 3 majestics on top of that at the very least, right? So it's actually a much larger jump than just this 68%, right? So that devaluing of, again, a 300,000 print run could be much higher, right, in terms of majestics, unfortunately. So yeah, definitely a little bit dicey water-wise. I would hope at 1 copy of Nitro would be in the deck. I think that would be fantastic, right? 2 heists and 1 Nitro shouldn't be too rough on, you know, devaluing those cards, right? Which is what LSS seems to, you know, base a lot of product design on, maintaining the values of majestics and cards, as we can see, right? Now, yeah, these are... This one to dice into? Yeah, we'll start with this one, right? So, majestic-wise, this is the value, or the cost, right, of specific classings of majestic. So, for instance, if you wanted to, as of yesterday, right, because I made these yesterday, buy every single generic in a playset, it would cost you $2,062 US, right? That is quite the expense. Now, class-wise, Assassin and Ranger are the 2 highest, thanks to Codex. If you took Codex out, they'd still be relatively high, but Mechanologist would definitely take the place, right? It's kind of rough when, you know, the majority of Mechanologist support and bulk is tied up in, say, Bright Lights, right? Which was a very heavily not enjoyed set. So I'm pretty sure a lot of that was just kept sealed and is, you know, dripping out slowly. Plus then we have the Dash Armory deck, we have the Max Armory deck also bumping that up, right? So yeah, still, these 3 I'd say are kind of the outliers, right? If we were to average up all the main classes and then, you know, divide them by the number of classes, it would bring us to an average price of $435. And sort of the question I want to pose is, what would the value be that you would put on, you know, decking out a class, right? Buying everything associated to a class. Now, this doesn't include legendaries. Legendaries, you know, add a sizable amount to it. But in terms of, you know, averaging them out where they currently stand. So if every class was playable, every hero was playable, and everyone was dispersed nice and a bit more evenly, right? We'd see that more reined in with the cards. So the average class price being $435, we then, say 85% of the cards are transferable across all heroes. So, if you were to play Betsy versus Bravo, right, you'd want 85% of Guardian cards, right? So that brings the price down to 370, which, is a lot more comparable to an actual case of any given product, right? So that as sort of the entry price into Fab, I think is definitely a lot more reasonable. Obviously, if you were to jump into Assassin, apparently that would be the most expensive by far, because also when it comes to, say, the Majestics for Assassin, the big issue is there are a lot more, in fact, the majority of them are playable, versus, say, Ranger, where you have it split between Riptide and Azalea, right? And then not everything is extremely playable, because there's like 120 Majestics for the majority of classes versus 99, 98 for Assassin, right? Which is, again, sizable difference, and a worry when it comes to Necromancer coming out, because we'll have the set support, we'll have the armory support, but all together, that's still going to be, a finite number of Majestics that are all funneled into most likely very, very similar decks where we don't get the variety of play that other classes actually have, right? Sorry, is Brutes cut off? Just realized this image goes wider than, obviously, the table. I can easily fix that, though. Do that. Same with transferable. Hopefully that's fine. There we go. Right. Legendaries. So, take Grains of Bloodspill, for instance, right? It's currently a $100 card, but prior to the Hunted, it was a $50 card. So 3 months ago. So Legendaries, we see a lot more, in and out of value, right? As comparison to our Majestics. Assassin has remained, despite, not always being completely playable, a very, very expensive class, right? So in comparison to our Legendaries, we can take a look at our nice little wheel, right? The average Legendary price is around $47. So, I think currently the majority of decks at most run about 3 Legendaries, right? Not all of them run 4. If you had to take 4, then we get to the point where that price is probably a little too high. But at $47, so taking our, again, average value of a Majestic at 370, right? To again, deck into a class, buy all the class cards specific to the hero you want to play, right? We then throw in an extra, say, $120. I think that's still a reasonable entry point for, again, a properly competitive deck, right? For Flesh and Blood. It might be a little too high, but again, we're expected to open cases, not displays, right? That's the golden ratio and everything that Fab is seemingly being designed around, either buy singles or, you can obviously gamble on a display, but chances are you want to be at cases or higher if you really want to open to find certain things, right? So yeah, from a Legendary perspective, I think LSS is doing a lot better, right? So post Fab 2.0, we obviously have the Rainbow Foils and the Cold Foils all slotted into same decks. I wish we'd see a... Do I actually? So, and Outsiders, right? And Dust Till Dawn, we had the trio of cards. So you had a Rainbow Foil, a Cold Foil, and Extended Art Cold Foil. The Cold Foil was cut, and if we get an Extended Art, we don't get a regular Cold Foil. It does sort of beg the question to me whether or not it would be nice to see 3 variants of a card, right? Whether it's non-foil, Rainbow Foil, Cold Foil, just to again have the really accessible level of card. But you also run the risk then that basically for the general mentality of Fab, if a card is playable, most people don't care about the lowest rarity. It's just getting a version to play. Hence why, like Shelter from the Storm, for instance, a Rainbow Foil is it's 1 in 18 to 1 in 5.9, so 3 times harder to find a Rainbow Foil Shelter than it is to find a normal Shelter. But obviously the price is not 3 times that. And then again with the Extended Art is not explosively more than that either, despite being, again, explosively harder to find. They should put out fully generic booster box product. Yeah, that's something I've heard from a few different people, and it would make a lot of sense, right? For instance, the Mastery for the Guardian product, right? Why is chat not working? Also, I've just noticed that. Why are you not popping up? Let's see. See if that does it. Anyway, I'll read out comments in full. So yeah, a full box of generics would make the most sense. Again, going back to our pie chart, right? Generics being explosively more expensive, and again, a larger portion of that figure being actual Majestics that, I don't really want to say mandatory, but obviously are put into a majority of decks, right? So Guardian being one of the lowest classes to sort of support means that they're not going from a price perspective, in my opinion. They're going for a let's make stuff playable perspective, right? They want Velda to come out of the gate most likely playable, and I would expect to see Betsy made more playable, right? Thanks to the Mastery product. It'd be weird if the focus doesn't have anything to do with Betsy and it's all just, say, Seismic Surge and that kind of mentality, and Betsy is just, swept under the rug, right? Because that's another big factor to distributing, right, these values more evenly, is if every hero was playable and every class was playable, right, and relatively competitive, then we'd see prices dispersed because you'd have a lot more freedom in choice. Whereas you have people who, play what they like thematically, and then you have people play what is obviously competitive, right? Hence, Mech and Ranger being quite high, Lightning and Earth being quite high, right, for the additional cards, right? And then also, if you look at, like, say, the Runeblade cards, a big portion of that is also the Lightning Runeblade cards, which are put here as well, right? Any talented, specific class cards, so Earth Wizard, Lightning Wizard, etc., are in their respective wedges, right? Rather than in Lightning or Earth. These are, for instance, like Felling being, quite the expensive card. So, yeah, I would much rather if the product coming out was a generic booster box. I mean, they could still make it playable. You could still have a lot of fun, right? I think, exploring what you could do from a limited standpoint of putting together a generic deck would actually be quite fun. And hero-wise, you could relatively do anyone, right? It could just be a crapshoot, right? Or you could do just a generic hero, or you could do merchant and say bard, right? There's lots of ways that they could actually make a generic product work that wouldn't just be reprinting for the sake of reprinting, but then also, proper, play, because that's a big thing. The crack shuffle play mechanic is coming back in the Guardian Mastery box, so I don't expect us to obviously see season, but we might see some level of event support geared towards the Mastery product to, again, make it a versatile product, because take Bright Lights, for instance, which had, limited appeal, right? They don't want limited appeal. Same with history products. They want something that, can either get people enticed to buy and open or enticed to play, right? So hence the crack shuffle play. But yeah, Guardian, it's not needed price-wise. It's just there to support heroes, hopefully, right? Yeah, if they're not making more crush cards in the Guardian set, then I'll be really confused. Yeah. It has to be directly for support, right? It's all brand new, which does, also mean that they could do literally anything they want, which is also kind of a head scratcher, right? I mean, for all we know, it's not just Velda. There could be Terra as an adult hero. There could be Jarl as a young hero. There could be all different ways for them to spin it and, make it a really fun product. But I do think, handling things price-wise is something that they kind of need to start shifting towards, right? Again, we sorely need reprints, right? Growing pains for this year and next year are going to be huge. Because you also got to remember, the final set of the year, also, it's probably already in production, right? The sets of next year have most likely been planned and are being established, and there's only a limited amount they can go, wow, we've seen Hunted, we've seen High Seas, we need to, times this print run by 1.5. No, it would be, a marginal increase. So, yeah, we will definitely see growing pains for probably the next year and a half, right? Which is fantastic, because it's, a sign that the game is doing great, right? It's getting more and more enticing for new players to come and play and swap over, especially as, MTG continues with its awful cards and universes beyond. So, yeah. Good comes with the bad, right? Okay, supplemental sets. So, currently, we get basically 3 main sets and our armory decks. Plus, we'll throw in mastery products now. We don't know, right? I'm basing this off of basically what we saw last year minus the Jarl deck, right? So, which is better, right? Is it better to have 2 main products and a supplemental set that, explores and expands upon play across all classes currently in the game? Or do we like the new mentality of expansion slot, armory decks, a mastery product here or there, right? It's a big question that sort of has been racking my brain, because going into it, right, when I started thinking about it, I was not the biggest fan of the expansion slot cards or the way it's being delivered, right? I would like to see a lot more cards be presented in the expansion slot, and it also have a much better pull rate, right? Because, these cards are by their word, the cards that have been designed to expand tournament play, yet they're also some of the hardest cards to pull within a product. They're not the most expensive cards sometimes, but they are the hardest cards to pull in a product, right? So, yeah. I don't know. Supplemental set versus everything we're getting. I think if they continue to add products to this lineup, right, again, we throw in, say, another Armory deck and the Mastery set, then it definitely outvalues what we get, in terms of expanding the game from a supplemental set. They could make Mini Crush, it does 2 or more damage, do X effect, yeah, that'd be interesting. It'd be... I wouldn't mind seeing, like, a wide Guardian, but there's also a decent amount of balancing going into that, right? Because you still have the really sizable buffs for Guardian. So the playstyle could almost be, if they are, kind of dangerous effects, you take a really small card and you just make it really big. Because they're not gonna give a Crush 2 effect and then make it a 7 for 7 or something like that, right? They'll rein it in, right? That would be a very interesting idea. See, there is so much that they could do with the Mastery product that we really don't know whether it's going to be this really expensive product because everything's new, or if it does just help push up some of those lower heroes and make Guardian playable across the board, which then frees up some of the retained value in those other heroes. So timeline-wise, right, we know... Oh, I had this, actually. We weren't looking for it online. The Mastery Paddock... sorry, I've been floating this morning. It's the awful change in weather, right? We went from hot to kind of cold, now back to hot. Made me kind of, fluey. But, yeah, so expect to see, obviously, another set this year. Another Armory deck, so bring us to 5, and then the Mastery product. So that, in totality, to me, definitely outvalues, us getting a supplemental set. But then it also poses the question, right? Would we rather still 2 main sets, a supplemental set, the Armory decks, and the Mastery product, right? The expense slots are cool, but they could have one every pack, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they could throw in rares, they could throw in commons, because that's another big thing that we lose from not having the supplemental set, is we're just getting the... It's not necessarily high value, but obviously the Majestic cards in the expense slot, whereas we get rares to expand upon X design, commons to expand upon X design, and Majestics in a supplemental set, right? Which is where the Armory decks kind of come into it, but we don't know. The expansion slots are cool. Yeah, so why are they all Majestics? They rarity. That's the only rationale I can see. But yeah, I mean, they could easily do rares, right? Bring down the rarity a lot. I mean, they throw legendaries in there too, so mixing up the rarity is not a hard ask, right? And they could just bump it up to a 25 card set, something like that, where you get a rare, you get a Majestic, right? Because necessarily they don't have to do the 9 copies of rares, right? They can still be specific rares, like what we see in the Armory decks, right? We didn't get, God, what is it? Aurora. Something Proton. Proton Strike, High Proton, whatever it is, right? That only came in 1 color variant. So, yeah, they can still do 1 color variants for the rares. 0 for 4 that forces you to block. You get crushed if you don't. Or, it'd be cool, actually, in that train of thought. What if it was something like, if this hits, your next crush effect only has to do X damage, right? So, tweak it. So if they don't block this, then the next card, they have to block even worse. Where if they do block this, then the next card, they still have to kind of block, right? That would be kind of dynamic. So yeah, Mastery product. Mastery Pack. God. Mastery Pack Guardian. Why do I not like that? I don't know. Anyway, Mastery Pack Guardian, 140 cards. Again, majority are brand new, so we expect reprints in the rares and commons simply for the sake of crack shuffle play. And, of course, mostly Guardian class, right? So, the question is, who does it feature, right? Alright, now, numbers-wise. So, in Dynasty, we got 246 cards versus the sets around it being Uprising and Outsiders, being 226 and 239. So again, we get more cards in a supplemental set. We are getting more cards overall now, but if we were to expect a supplemental set currently, I would also expect it to be a higher card count. So that, in comparison to the Mastery product, right, is a kind of big difference because we're getting a much smaller set, but more class-focused, right? Some of the rares and commons from the set, like Everfest, are so good. Yeah, like Blade Runner, Wild Ride, Bare Fangs, March. I'm pretty sure all of them. Even weirdly, Dust Till Dawn has, well, minus, whatever reason they decide to just reprint the Angels. That was really, really dumb, right? It's one of the big hints that makes us think Dust Till Dawn was meant to be draftable. But yeah, supplemental sets do a lot more than the expansion slot, right? Hence why, again, it seems like the Armory decks and now the Mastery Pack are meant to make up for that, right? So, Majestics, 51, again, comparison to Uprising Outsiders, 27/31, so that is a sizable amount extra Majestics. Again, it's akin to 2 sets of expansion slot cards, basically, right? Rares, 30 extra rares, basically, right? So again, sizable amount of very, very impactful cards too. Commons, we do get less, but that's completely understandable. If we took out, say, the commons that were just draft fodder from any given main set, you'd find that a supplemental set still has more impactful commons and significantly less tokens, because we don't need the weapons, we don't need the heroes, etc., right? So overall, the set has more cards going for it, right? Even though it's only +7 cards, it's still a lot more Majestics, a lot more rares. The commons, although less, are more impactful, right? So in comparison to our expansion slot, so far, if we take a look at Rosetta, Misfail, and Heavy Hitters, that was 38 Majestic cards, right? Versus, again, the 20 that we saw in Dynasty, on top of what you'd normally see, right? So overall, 51, was it? Yeah, 51 Majestics. So that's already great, right? And then you throw in the rares, brings it to 50 new cards altogether. Again, more impactful commons. So overall, a supplemental set does kind of outbeat a expansion slot, right? Hence why we have to then throw in the Armory deck. So Aurora had 4 new equipment pieces, 2 Majestics, 2 rares, 2 commons, and then, well, total 10 basically new cards. So if we're getting, 4 of them plus the supplemental sets, that's 88 new cards. Sorry, the expansion slot, not the supplemental sets. That's 88 new cards, right? Would you ever be up for making a video on deck building? I tried deck build, but I struggled with it. I'm sure be a lot of... I wouldn't mind. The problem is I don't want to steer people in the wrong direction, because I like goofy decks. I build for not necessarily value, but shenanigans and fun, right? But, doing tips on the basics, so breakpoints and how to kind of judge the value of a card, I guess, would actually be a nice change of pace, right? Yeah, I'd be up for that. I can definitely put that in the works. So, expansion slot, less common. Armory decks, short supply. Big no-nos for what it's trying to do. Versus, again, a supplemental set that is printed, right? To be opened and accessible, right? I think that's one of the biggest things I dislike about the Armory decks. Again, the KO Armory deck is 3 times the value now, right? And it's been out for a year. That's very, very bad. They should have printed a lot more of them, right? Especially if they are sort of this intro product, right? Armory deck should be what you pick up. You want to learn the game, go get a Blitz deck, play a few. Then you want to go to events, pick up an Armory deck. But, you don't have the choice. I mean, you should have basically all the Armory decks still be available on shelves so that a new player can go and can pick any Armory deck they want, right? To pick from. I would want them to eventually cycle around to every single class in terms of an Armory deck, and for all of them to be available on a shelf so that any new player could go and pick any class they want to play. But obviously we don't see that. They are short printed again because LSS's big sort of priority is maintaining the value of Majestics, which is, again, not necessarily a bad thing, but for the larger growth of the game, results in our growing pains, right? So, heroes. It's 36 heroes currently, not including the ones that have LL'd, right? We're already getting 3 more thanks to High Seas, getting at least 1 in the Mastery product, and then probably at least another 3 by the end of year, right? Currently, we have 2 heroes looking to rotate, and Dash is just being sort of drained. I would expect Dash to maybe be a bit of testing or play, potentially from the Max Armory deck, although I wouldn't bank on it, right? So, generally speaking, we will see people transition from X hero to X other hero come a new set. And, Zen is probably the definite to LL after, these latest few major events. But potentially no one else, right? If a lot of people just take Zen, then that's Zen. If a lot of people, swap to Syndra or Aurora, they won't LL. So we're continuing to get a lot more heroes than what we see cycle out. Meaning that, again, going back to expansion slots, supplemental sets, and Armory decks, they're doing a lot worse because they can't possibly keep up with the number of heroes. They can try and keep up with the number of classes, but they definitely can't keep up with the number of heroes. Hence why I really, really hope that the Mastery product isn't about what's new, and rather, again, giving Betsy support, giving Bravo support, giving all these different heroes support, right? Bravo, I think, is sat at his value for quite a long time, right? So, again, getting him up and running and then cycling out would kind of be their objective, and then be replaced by Velda, right? But we also might just see a lot of people just play Velda, because Velda, in my opinion, at least, seems like just a better Bravo, because the dominate effect is just easier to trigger, and it does more for your game plan by setting up those seismic surge and having the discount versus paying for your dominate through Bravo, right? So currently, looks like we get 3 sets. So that's 9 classes of major support, and if we maintain 1 mastery set a year, right, that would be 1 class of support. That's 10 classes, which does its job, because there are currently 10 classes of the game, 11 come high seas, 12 if you count Pirate, but we don't know the level of support Pirate's going to see. So that's actually a great outlook, right? That we get major support for 10 classes every development cycle. Now, if mastery sets aren't actually, 1 a year, if they're every other year, then that drops off a bit. But if they can maintain that, I'd be happy. I'd be completely happy with the current go, because then we also get minor-wise, right, our 4 armory decks and our expansion slots. So overall, what we're seeing now, right, come post this year, LSS will be able to comfortably handle the classes available within the game, right? Not the heroes, but the classes, which is definitely a really, really positive step, because that was one of the big issues that a lot of people had when we transitioned to expansion slot over supplemental sets, is that the development cycle for any given class would then increase, right? And if we go back a couple of years, it was 2 years. To circle around to a specific class / hero would take around 2 years, right? So for them to be up to the point of being able to support 10 classes, majority of classes, all classes, in a sense, every development cycle would be fantastic, right? So happy if this is maintained versus, bringing back supplemental sets. Now, the expansion slot. So, a little pie chart. There are 2 pieces here that I think should never, ever be, right? These are the most expensive cards in the expansion slot. Hunter's Clave and even Luminaris should not be in the expansion slot, right? Or if they are in the expansion slot, they should be tokens. They should be something that is designed to just be acquired, right? Gating weapons, right, behind the expansion slot, I think, is one of the dumbest ideas that I've seen LSS do, in all honesty, because, again, weapons are probably the biggest pivotal piece, right? Having a quality weapon, for instance, again, Luminaris versus what was given in Dusk Till Dawn, is a huge difference. So having it not easily accessible is kind of a problem to me, right? So, yeah. In that note, Bright Lights, we had legendaries in the expansion slot. I feel like they're not going to continue that, right? We haven't seen it continued. So I'd expect a legendary reprint in the expansion slot, but the majority of expansion slot cards to be mostly equipment by way of armor pieces, right? Hopefully not weapons, and then actual play pieces. The equipment has done sort of alright, because none of it's, I would say, super mandatory. It's just a good alternative, right, to what's kind of accessible, and, usually gets devalued by legendaries, right, which is absolutely fine. But, so if we break up the odds, it's 5.9 packs for a inset Majestic versus 12.5 packs to find an expense slot Majestic, right? So that is why they basically keep the card pool the size it is. If we cycle through all of our inset Majestics, right, we should cycle through all of our expansion slot Majestics, which is, again, a good ratio to keep. But the quality of cards then becomes even more impactful, because we get a huge divide, right? So I'd say Already Dead and below are absolutely fine. Tome of Imperial Flame being this big chase card for the expansion slot, again, a card that is basically mandatory to any red line royal deck, right, is worrisome, because it's nice to have chase cards. Chase cards should probably be the inset cards, right? And the expansion slot should do its whole job of expanding the tournament card pool, and therefore being widely accessible, right? At least that's my opinion of the expansion slot in a nutshell. So to sort of break up the different products, right? The supplemental sets provide class support at a greater quantity and level through more mixed rarity, but have reduced interest due to not facilitating a season, right? So basically they're not draftable, right? You can't play with them, and therefore the interest in the product does decline. We'll make this a bit smaller since, again, it's cut off. Give me a sec. There we go. Right, so they all have their own level of value, but they also have their own levels of drawbacks. Supplemental sets from LSS perspective are kind of this big risk, right? Again, they can do a fantastic thing for the game, but it's also a big gap. If they were to, say, replace the Mastery product, and, the final set of the year was brought up, right, and we have, 4 months of X set, then it'd be fine. But we don't quite see that, right? It's about 3 months of a given set, and then we have the Christmas break, right, where, things die down a little bit, which is fine as well, but also then supply. I know Hunted, at least my local LGS, is running out, right, so they won't be able to run Hunted till high seas, which is obviously a shame because, that's kind of the main crux of the season tied to any set, is that, events continue. Mastery products. It's looking like it provides focused class support, so hopefully for all heroes within said class. Again, we don't know, but it may have reduced interest, but it also has that potential place in the larger scheme of getting complete sets of all the Majestics, right, as a community for Flesh and Blood. So they should help rein in the prices, they should help keep them in check, but we don't often see that, right? Generally, it just increases the amount of product open, which means that more people are putting money in, and therefore they have to get their money out, and therefore, more people want the playable cards over the chase cards that may be pulled. So we have legendaries, come down, we have some marbles really come down, and then we see the playable Majestics continue to just rise, right? So, yeah, to me, Majestics really are the biggest crux of the game currently, right? And then Armory decks, they should expand upon an archetype and definitely act as the entryway into said archetype. But, again, we see limited printing, and that generally inflates the price relatively quickly, which is not a shame, right? Again, I highly think that KO should still be something you can easily go and buy off the shelf if you want to get into Brute, right? The time to for it to sell out and cut would be after the next Brute set, right? If we get Savage Lands at the end of the year, right, it would be beautiful to already have the established product. So someone could go, well, I really am interested in Brute. I'll pick up the KO Armory deck, I'll pick up a case of Savage Lands, and we'll go from there. But they can't, right? It'll just be Savage Lands and whatever product we get along with it, right? If bundles continue, that's okay, but not great. I know, there's a fair amount of people who don't like having to buy the bundle versus prior being able to buy, a cheap, just one singular Blitz deck that you have an interest in. So there's always good things and bad things about any given, product, right? So it is nice that we are seeing just a wide variety that will definitely help make up for it, but growing pains. Growing pains is the word of the day. There's continued growing pains in Fab as, we continue to outpace the development of LSS in terms of what they can coordinate for any given set, unfortunately. Right. I think that's everything that I wanted to sort of go over, right? Oh, can we touch on the Max Armory deck? Sure, why not, right? Yeah, we'll touch on the Max Armory deck cards quickly. I should be able to make this. It's fine. Oh, full screen. There we go. Alright, so, again, these are the new cards that were shared from the leaked, or the early release of the Armory deck matchup. So it was Max versus Aurora, and I would assume Aurora stomped him. But generally speaking, it seems like the showcase videos will always be the two most recent Armory decks. Now, again, in comparison to Aurora, we also got Arc Lightning. There we go, right? Which should be akin to Heist. So we got 2 copies of Arc Lightning. So I'd expect 2 copies of Heist. We know Heist is in there. That was also shared from people who did see the video or parts of the video. And then I would also expect another rare and 2 commons to help shore up gameplay. Sorely needed is some sort of alternative to High Octane. Cards we currently have, right, I don't think do enough to really make it impactful. Big issue for me, right, regarding the functionality of this Armory deck is Bankbreaker. So having to find Construct is kind of a problem. So I'm hoping there's a fetch card, because basically the mentality that I've learned or rationalized from this deck is Bankbreaker's sole purpose is there to make up for the crappy way Max has to put out items, right? So Max versus any other mech aside from, say, Klloo, although Klloo, you just focus on Evos, you have to pay for your item and you lose functionality, right? You can put out Hyperdriver, but you have to crank it. You have to pay 1, you lose a card from hand. So the mentality there is Bankbreaker should come in as this fix of paying 1 to then swing for 3. Hence why it's the twice a turn, right? That's my mentality. So finding Bankbreaker is how you're meant to recoup the value of taking an excessive amount of items. So if it's hard to find, if you're banking on finding the 1 of 3 copies in your 60 card deck, then it gets a little bit troublesome to me, right? What do you think Armory decks if only had reprints and not unique cards? That's a curiosity. Depends who they do it for, I think. So if it's adjacent to what they're doing now, I'd be all for it. If it was in replace of what they're doing now, then we go back to the whole we're losing a supplemental set and we're not getting quite enough out of the expansion slot. The development cycle to me currently now hinges on the expansion slot, armory decks, and a mastery product in order to continue to functionally grow the game without having really big hiccups in heroes and classes. But I would really like to see that mentality, right? An assassin armory deck with reprints, and if they want white border, they can screw it over and do white border, right? There's ways for them to handle it, even if it's not full, play sets of a card. It would be a highly good product, right? For lack of better words. It would, the problem is LSS in terms of targeting, right? So for instance, if they were to sit down and go, well, Assassin is this expensive, let's put all of these cards in an armory deck, that armory deck will come out, either the last quarter or the second last quarter of next year, right? Then it becomes a bit worrisome because does everything else they have going on for Assassin matter, right? Does new LLing matter? Does that just wreck the ecosystem? So hence why I do think LSS does play extremely safe, but a sole reprint armory deck, right, that A, gets people into the game, gets them a proper functional deck, would be fantastic, right? And we see, like Sink Below, there was one other card, Snatch, right, in the armory decks, and they are sorely needed reprints as well. So yeah, I'd definitely be for a higher level of reprints, especially, again, when it comes to certain Majestics. I mean, my mentality for Majestics, wherever my little pie chart is, right? So, a playset of any given Majestic, right? Imagine like the cap was $20, so $60 for the playset. I think that would be where I'd be comfortably at, right? Again, thinking about a 60 card deck, obviously not every card is going to be that $60 playset, but, that sort of being the targeting cap, I think is still significantly good, right? You pull one legendary, you pull one $20 Majestic, you pull one cold foil, you pull maybe an extended art, maybe a Marvel, right, in a box, and there's your value, right? But currently, we get very, very big skews when it comes to Majestics. So reining them in, yeah, it would be definitely something I would like to see, right? But along with expanding upon current archetypes and card design, right? All of these cards. Again, I think Max is by far going to be the most impactful. I don't know if he's going to be good. I don't know if he's going to make Max viable. He'll definitely make Max playable. But expanding upon hyperdrivers in this sense is something that is sorely needed, right? We almost need this version as a contract armory deck for Assassin, right? With a few reprints in there to help tone down pricing. But, expanding upon the card pool, just inflating what choices you have, is also just another way to devalue cards and, create less need for reprints. So there's lots of different ways that LSS can handle it, right? And we're seeing that through this variety of product design. So yeah, makes me excited to see how the year ends, right? And what comes in the following year. But, it's turbulence simply because the community growth has outpaced all of the expectations of LSS, right? Again, ICs is really, really going to be rough, I think, right? It's going to sell out, it's going to be chased, it's going to be opened. There's not going to be a whole lot for actual, play, right? For events at your LGSs, I'm pretty sure, right? And then treasure packs are another whole fiasco kind of waiting to happen. Right, I think though that's everything. So yeah, crack another Monarch, although I don't think we'll top the box unless we find a legendary. To end it off, right? I will just quickly gloss over my assets. Okay, so I missed anything I do want to discuss, but I'm pretty sure we cycled through the brunt of them, right? which is good. I basically use this as a way to workshop my next video. Because I do want to talk about expansion slots and supplemental sets, right? But, yeah, no, I think we're good. Caught up on news, talked about basically the other major videos that I've put out, right? So yeah, just doing this as sort of a weekly recap, I think is going to be the right idea. Did my phone go to sleep? I think it did. There we go. Alright. Crack one more Monarch to end things off. Hoping for any Dynamo Husk or Footsteps would be beautiful. I think other than that, Majestic-wise, I don't think anything else. It was just literally the Soul Shield is what I was missing from playsets of Monarch. Oh. Just me, or did it get quite dark? With the light? There we go. The reflection. Alright. What can we find? Are you excited for the keynote speech? I really am. There should be a lot of juicy information coming out of that. More than anything, I think we want to see what the mysterious symbol is, the high seas. Still, kind of want it to be flipped, right? And the heroes to have something on their flip side. But I also don't expect it to be flipping. I expect it to just be tapping. It makes kind of the most sense. Nada. Listen, how many counters is Glisten? Distributed 3. Removal 3. Oh, Glisten would be great in Enigma. Too bad. Premium Weavers. No M. I think that's 4, so should hopefully see an M in this pack. Nada, and nada. I mean, sort of makes sense. We had one really good box, right? So, potentially not a good box. Mutated Mass, not a good box. I want to like Mutated Mass, but compared to our other, what would you call them? I'll call them Final Act cards, right? Our other Final Act cards, it's just not good. Technically, they should all be Mutated Mass cards since this came first, right? Yeah, so its power and defense is equal to twice the number of cards in your pitch zones with different costs. That is just utterly crap, right? On defense, this is most likely 2, right? You get to the point where you've pitched 2 cards, play something else to then also block with this. Your turn is just utter garbage, right? And then attacking-wise as well, it's what? You play from your banish zone, so it could potentially be a 6. 1 for 6. Ooh. Yeah, no, not quite. I think there was ways they could have made that work, right? Especially if it wasn't just your pitch zone. It was, blocking out your opponent's turn and getting, block value from that. Be a really interesting card. But as it stands, nope. Soul Reaping, though. Significantly better, right? It's basically equivalent to Mutated Mass, right? A 1 for 6. But better block. Better design. Also, as much as I hate it, I should probably put it with the Majestics. I mean, God. With silver, could you get... No, I think I've done the math on this. I think you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 7 cost in Levia, meaning that Mutated Mass at best is still only 10 damage. If you were to, take a bunch of silver. And there's no guarantee that you hit all the right numbers. But Nourishing Emptiness, there we go. That's a better M. Also the weirdest foiled card, right? If you ever get the foil. It's so minor. And you might not even think it was foiled. Nada. Although we like seeing Nada cold foil on, not so great equipment. Gives us hope. Out muscle. Time skippers. Nada. Nada. Yeah. I mean, there's so much cool things they could have done with the foil, right? And still kept it minor too. So imagine if they foiled all of the stuff on the... What's it called? Pagoda? No. Is it a pagoda? Anyway, the barrier, curtain, whatever. Right? Imagine all that was foiled. That would look sick. But instead, it's just the teacup in her belt. Oh, Guardian as a foil. Turn Guardian's Shadow onto your hand, active ability only while it's in your banish zone. Is that worth playing? It'll be a 4 for 6. I feel like at one point it was great. Or at least it was used a lot. Problem is, block value has just gone up a lot as well. Oh, soul food. Soul food and all your cards into your soul. See, if this had a cost, right? Imagine this was one resource that you could float to. I could see it being workable to be able to then, just stash a whole bunch of cards and go into a Figment or go into an Angel. No, not an Angel. No, just Figments. Figments are the ones on board, yeah. And then go into a Figment. Or I guess, Aurora. That'll be the other one. But, no. I don't think ever using it just to get 3 cards in your soul is good. Guardian seems like a great, yeah, cool card, right? The Shadow Beast that you just recall whenever you need him. But there are a lot of cards like that seem really, really cool and interesting. I really want Fractal Replication to really be worthwhile. And all they had to do was make it not copy Phantasm. And I am pretty sure it'd be just taken as just a way to replicate any attack. But then it'd also be utterly disgusting if it didn't replicate Phantasm. Stubby Hammers is the cold foil. Once upon a time. Oh well. Still a really, really cool card. Oh, cold foil replaces the foil. That I did not realize. And a Bolting Blade. See? Got a reprint. In the Bolton Armory deck, right? Yeah, we can still find something. Pretty sure your chances of double cold foils were very, very slim. Right? They had to be like in the top corner of one side. You to find it at the bottom. But you never know. Again, we got the library. That. Spill Blood. Also a nice card. All it takes is even more axes, right? For another axe-focused warrior. Double Spill Blood, even better. So, yeah. Warrior, in that regard, is kind of more interesting to me, right? Because we now have Light Draconic and 2? No, 3. 3. I always forget about Olympia, right? 3 warriors. So it's by far the busiest class at the moment. And then on top of that, you throw in just the weapon design. The fact that you can take kind of anything as anyone, right? Yeah, sort of Kasai obviously wants swords, and Fang wants daggers, but, still, the flexibility of weapons there means that it is the most varied class they could do a lot with, right? And we've kind of been my pick as their first mastery product. Again, I just can't really rationalize Guardian because it's such a middle level ground, except for Velda, right, as the main way. Get her out there. But Assassin would have made the most sense, right? If they just picked any class and didn't have, I guess an idea of design going into it. Oh well. Hopefully we get Necromancer next year. Because I do expect Necromancer to be highly popular. And therefore the cards to be very, very tough. Right? So, good 2 boxes. Nice Cold Foil library that the camera does not want to focus on. At least you can see the shine. Dummy Hammerers. Once Upon a Time. Need that. That was the one I took out. And then, yeah, Soul Food, Exude, and our Nourishing. And definitely some really, really nice pulls from Monarch. Not to mention the other cards, right? Again, one of the other big things I always consider with Majestics is all it takes is the right hero, right? Everything just booms. But, in that sense, if they're able to create a lot of right heroes, then everything would level out. So, bittersweet. Anyway, that will do me for today. Anyone hanging around or watching posts, thanks as always. As for people who came and chat, thank you. I like having someone to converse with as I ramble on about whatnot, right? All right. Stay tuned for next week, because next week, speech. Beautiful, right? The buzz for High Seas is just going to get worse, so if you haven't pre-ordered, I would highly recommend, if you do want High Seas, to pre-order, because it's not gone already. It's probably going to be gone soon, unfortunately, right? Again, running theme would be, it is grossly underprinted for what is necessary, right? Especially introducing a new class. But it's still going to have a decent sized printing. Anyway,